everybody, it's Rose from Rebel Leader Academy. So a couple days ago, I believe it was last Thursday, I put up a poll asking whether you guys thought that technology in general would do more harm or be more helpful kind of in the end. Like when this all plays out, what do you guys see into the future? And we had some really interesting results. So far, the poll's still open, but so far, we have 35% of you that are on the positive side, that you guys are like, you know what, I think it's going to do good. I think we're actually going to do well with it. We're going to figure this out. But 65% of you guys said, you know what, I don't think it's going to work at all. I think we're going to totally fuck ourselves with this whole technology thing, and it's just going to go downhill from here. So I don't see either one as really wrong, because at this point, it's still very much a choice, right? Every technology, we always have the choice of what are we going to do with this? Are we going to use it for the betterment of humanity, or are we going to try to destroy ourselves with it, right? You can look at this. One of my favorite examples is the helicopter. So the helicopter was invented by a man named Sikorsky, and his whole shebang behind wanting to invent the helicopter was because he saw a need to rescue people in very dangerous places, whether it was in the middle of the ocean or on a mountaintop, places where a human rescue couldn't actually go. So he had this brilliant invention. Hey, Dale. So he had this brilliant invention of something that could basically hover, go in any of these places and be able to vertically lift somebody out of the situation and help them. So the whole reason behind his idea for helicopters was to save lives, right? Then, of course, we have our militaries, and the militaries looked at this new technology and they went, well, I don't know about saving lives. Sure, it's good for that, but it's also good at, getting bombs in really tight places, or using it for their own agendas to actually hurt more people. So again, same technology, regardless of what it was invented for, we are going to decide how it's being used. So the question is, if it was in your hands, how would you use it? And of course, most of us, we like to think of ourselves as good people, right? We like to usually say, you know what, I think I would use it to help people. But our minds, we have this part of our brain that isn't actually developed for that. So we have this whole survival mechanism in the back of our mind that drives us, and it's all about how do we keep ourselves and those we love alive. And this is the key. This is so key to how we're going to use technology in the future. Because I like to call this the boundary of compassion, right? And we have individual boundaries of compassion, and they change based on our circumstances. So when we feel that we are in lack and we don't have enough, our boundary of compassion, those in our circle that we consider our own and that we're actually willing to help out with our own resources and our own energy and things like that, when we feel like we don't have enough, that boundary contracts towards ourselves. Sometimes to the point where you have situations where people go, fuck it, I'm only here for myself. Like, I'm going to survive this. You all can go fuck yourselves. I'm out of here. Even if you look at things like our horror movies or, our apocalyptic sort of movies, you also have those people, they're out there for themselves. That's because that part of our brain has triggered that we can only take care of us, an individual unit. It's up to us to survive. And if you look at the whole, trajectory towards, okay, we as a species, we want to survive, it makes sense that in times of true scarcity or emergency even, that our boundary of compassion might go all the way down to just one. However, if we are living in a state of abundance, we have so many resources, we've got more than enough food, water, money, shelter, everything we need, our whole boundary of compassion starts to expand outward. And so you've seen this always throughout history, where you have people whose boundary has expanded beyond themselves, beyond their family, their children, their spouses, whatever, their parents. It's expanded outward to their communities. It's expanded outward to the level of their nation, right? And then for some, it's continued to expand outward to all of humanity. So it's like all of a sudden they feel the deepest sense of care for and love for the whole. the whole planet, not just of humanity, but you know, it extends out to all of life on Earth, let's say, animals, whatever. So thinking about that shrinking in terms of when things are scarce and the expansion in terms of when resources are abundant, this has been okay. We've been able to go through these cycles as a species because we haven't had, up to this point, technologies that were so powerful that if for whatever reason our mind was triggered into that shrinking perspective, that I'm out for myself and nobody else, it didn't matter that much because we didn't have our finger on a button that said, fuck everybody else, boop, you're all dead. Or let's say CRISPR technology, where we can genetically engineer now kind of willy-nilly. I mean, that is incredibly powerful technology, and we're just starting to play with it, but it has the power to genetically manipulate pretty much anything we want. And so if you've got that technology in the hands of somebody whose mind is being triggered into these scarcity-based, very limited compassion, we've got that going on. Now we have recipe for disaster, right? Now we have all of those like evil genius case scenarios. And that's really where people, that 65% of people who say technology, I just foresee it to be bad, they're banking on the fact that for most of our evolution, our time as a species, they're banking on the fact that we have had a very contracted view of who we call our own and who we're going to take care of. So they're not wrong. If that's true, that's our normal operating procedure as a species. We haven't actually lived in a whole lot of abundance, right? Most of us still wouldn't say we live in a whole lot of abundance. But if we can flip that dynamic and consciously say, all right, I understand the contraction and the expansion, and I also understand that we no longer have the luxury of being able to contract and not blow up the world, right? To contract and not do something with technology that's going to have a chain reaction that's going to end up detrimental somehow to our species or to the planet. So given that, what we're looking to do is train people on the individual level. How do you keep that expanded version, that expanded boundary of your compassion, even when you're triggered into fear, even when you're triggered into some kind of scarcity response? Because that in itself is going to be the key to whether or not we can take all of these incredibly powerful technologies and actually use them for the benefit of the planet, for the benefit of the species. Or if we are going to allow ourselves to go into that deeper part of our mind and be triggered into those scarcity instincts and into those fear-based responses and use that technology in a way that even though it instinctually feels okay to do, it doesn't actually logically make sense anymore because the scope of our consequence is actually the planet. And we're having a lot of problems with this even now when we look at environmental issues, or we look at kind of this ebb and flow between countries making agreements. We look at things like the EU, right? So we have this idea, we're globalizing, we're integrating, we are recognizing that we can no longer make decisions that just affect our community, our nation. Every time we make these decisions, they literally have a chain reaction, they affect everything. So when we're looking at countries either trying to come together and trying to live more in that abundant, cooperative-based instinct, versus the countries around the world that are more digging their heels in, putting up walls, putting up barriers, and trying to shrink back as if the technologies that have globalized us are suddenly going to go away, which at this point they're not. So we have to decide as a species that, number one, we are globalized. Whether we like it or not, that's not even really a question anymore. We are a globalized society. We are connected consciously via the internet with each other. But we're also connected just because of the power of these technologies. You can't think that you're going to edit genetics over here and not have that have ripple effects all around the world on different things. So coming to that level of consciousness and just recognizing that we're already there, and that the key to whether or not we use this technology for quote good or evil all comes down to this concept of where is our boundary of compassion, right? Who do you, and you can ask yourself this on a daily basis, you can ask yourself this when you're angry, and it's a challenge. How do you keep that level of your own personal expansion to continue to include the world? And that, by the way, that includes people you don't like, it includes things you don't like. I mean, it's forcing us to up level in terms of our morality, our consciousness. It's a vast up leveling to what we've ever had to do, and we have to do it quickly if we're going to keep up. Because if we don't, it's like you got these powerful technologies equal our less shrinking, compassionate boundary instincts. Well, yeah, that just goes towards annihilation. 65% of us see it going that way. All right, cool, that's a choice we can make. 35% of us are seeing, no, maybe there's hope of us holding that bigger boundary. Maybe there's hope that we can actually make decisions from a global consciousness and from a recognition that every single thing we do has these global consequences now. And it's the first time in our species that we've had to think that way, really. I mean, maybe we had to think about our nation, maybe we had to think about our community, but we've never really had to think of the entire world as one. And that's a very big shift for us. So as you're trying to have this expanded version of compassion for the world, I do hope that you can bring that compassion into yourself when you're having moments where you're not being the bigger person, where you're not able to really hold that expansion, where you're having that contracting, fear-based moment, and say, all right, I recognize this is hard. This is not easy, but it is necessary. And that's kind of what I want to leave you with tonight, is this whole concept of where is your boundary of compassion, and the greater and the larger you can hold that boundary of compassion, the more hope we actually have to be able to use these technologies, which, by the way, are incredible. When I start telling you, really, and we go into these technologies, the power that they have for us to jump ahead leaps and bounds in terms of how we interact with each other as a species, how we take care of the planet, the opportunities that we have for human ingenuity and expansion and happiness and fulfillment. The upside of these technologies is gigantic if we can just get over our contraction, fear-based instincts. So there you have it. I will be talking a lot more this week on Wednesday and Friday about more of these technologies. Again, if you have questions for Q&A Friday, be sure to write to me at rose@rebelleaderacademy.com, and I will be answering your questions on Friday about this stuff. But hopefully you have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you are, and I will see you guys again on Wednesday. All right, thank you so much. Mwah. Love you guys.